Hi, and welcome to your Monday edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. We're doing it live. It's Ian Mendez with you here to sit in the host chair for the next 90 minutes or so. 8 playoff matchups for us to preview going around the league with our beat writers. Let's get right to it because I know these two guys have their own little audio room they got to get to. It is Jeremy Rutherford and Mike Russo covering the Minnesota Wild and the St. Louis Blues. I know, listen, guys, apologize for a little bit of a false start there. So let's get right into it. We've seen this matchup coming for weeks, guys. So let me ask you, I'll start with you, Jeremy Rutherford. Who's the favorite in this series?
It's Mike Russo's Minnesota Wild, right? I think, Ian, the Blues have really dominated the Wild under Craig Berube, particularly this season. 3 wins against them, 1 in the Winter Classic, but 2 of these have come in overtime. So I think this is a pick'em as much as it can be a pick'em. It really is. I know some of the national writers, including our staff at The Athletic, has gone with the Wild. I think it was something like 23% in Game 6. But if you get to a Game 7, the picks were split. So, Mike can touch on that, but I'm looking forward to this because it's so even. I've covered a lot of series over the years where maybe they were a little more one-sided. This one's going to be really intriguing.
Same question to you, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, what do we know, right? 75% of the 10,000 people I polled on Twitter had Talbot starting Game 1, including myself. So all predictions go out the window once the puck drops, and that's the one thing. By the way, I had my name on there actually says Jeremy Rutherford's assistant, so I'm kind of bummed that you guys fixed it. Yeah, I mean, look, to me, it's concerning that the Wild haven't figured out a way to beat this team. Now, to me, I do throw out the Winter Classic. Wild hadn't played in 2 weeks, and we're missing 5 guys from the lineup, including their best center and their 2 best defensemen. But the 2 games in St. Louis were definitely, much closer games. I thought the Wild played well in both. Same exact thing happened, only the opposite in both those games. One game, the Wild blew a lead, came and wound up in overtime and lost, and the other one they came back and wound up losing that game in overtime. Last year's games were pretty much bloodbaths all the way around. The Blues absolutely crushed the Wild pretty much in every single game, especially in St. Louis. So, I think home ice was very important here. But when you're playing a team as deep as the Blues, 9-20 goal scorers, it's not like the Greenway, Eriksson Ek and Foligno line can go up against everybody. So I definitely think that this is going to be a tight series and an exciting one.
And it might come down to goaltending. And Mike, you touched on the fact that a lot of people thought Cam Talbot would start. Let me ask both of you guys this question, but Mike, I'll start with you. Do you think in this series we're going to see 4 different starting goaltenders?
I think potentially 2 on the Wild. I mean, unless the Wild are going out and sweep, I think it sets up well that you're going to play both. And I think the Wild have shown down the stretch that they're willing to play both. Look, Cam Talbot did everything he possibly could to win the game one starting role tonight. I mean, he went 13-0-3 down the stretch. He hasn't lost in regulation since March 1st, yet they go with the Hall of Famer. And that's what Marc-Andre Fleury is going to be. I think it's a different look to show St. Louis. I mean, obviously, it's not like the Blues have never played Fleury, and they've beaten him 3 times this year when he was the Blackhawks. But the Wild, I think, want to give them a different look. Cam Talbot's lost 7 in a row against the Blues. In that 13-0-3 stretch, 2 of those overtime losses in that stretch were against the Blues, and one of them I didn't think he played well, and I thought he gave up some bad goals in a couple of those games. So I think this was all about a decision to go with the guy that everybody knows has 3 cups, has a ton of playoff wins. You have the 4th most playoff wins in NHL history going in net for the Wild. I think that's why they got him, and that's why they're starting him tonight.
So Jeremy Rutherford, the Wild decided to go with experience, but the Blues, not so much. They're not going to go with the guy that won them the Stanley Cup just 3 years ago, at least to start this series, right?
Yeah, not so much. And you only have to go back to 2019 when they went with the guy with no experience, Jordan Binnington, to find out when they had success with that decision. Jordan Binnington, of course, taking the Blues to the Stanley Cup. But Ian and Mike, how about the fact that the 2 beat writers, we had to wait and watch the morning skate to see who goes out to the starters net to find out who would be even in net for these 2 teams. That's pretty amazing to me. But Billy Husso, definitely the more consistent goalie of the 2 between him and Jordan Binnington throughout the season. No surprise to me that Billy Husso is the starter. You know, will we see all 4 goalies in this series? Mike just spoke to the Minnesota Wild perspective. I'll speak to the Blues. The Blues certainly hope that, they don't have to turn to the backup. They hope that their decision in Billy Husso, he'll be the guy. But he's never played in a playoff game. And regardless of what Jordan Binnington did a few years ago, that's pretty rare. So I don't know that he'll have a super short leash, but I do see a situation where if the Blues lose a game or 2 up here in Minnesota, that they do turn to Jordan Binnington.
Well, listen, speaking of short leashes, we got to let you guys go because you've got a live room of your own started. So we do want to direct our listeners right now as we're doing this live. Jeremy Rutherford, Mike Russo are hosting a live room ahead of game 1. So head on over to their respective, you guys will have the link, right? You're going to tweet it out here coming up?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep, definitely. Thanks,
Okay.
Ian. And
Okay.
talk to you in a minute, Jeremy.
All right. See you soon.
There we go. Jeremy Rutherford, Mike Russo, getting you all set for the Minnesota Wild and the St. Louis Blues. That game 1 goes at 9:30 Eastern time here on Monday, 7:30 Central time. And that is one of 4 games on the docket. The one that might be the most intriguing, however, is the one happening in the Atlantic Division where you have the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs. And the Maple Leafs it doesn't feel like they can necessarily get over the hump. And it looked like maybe there was a chance we were going to get the Boston Bruins. It's not. They get the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning. And Tampa looks a little bit, a little bit different. And we're going to get Joe Smith, Jonas Siegel coming in here. And I think we got them. Oh, look at this. This is unbelievable. There we go. The 2 guys who have the same initials, JS and JS. It's Joe Smith and Jonas Siegel. Listen, guys, thanks so much for taking the time here on a game day to join us. Let me start with this question. I'll ask you this, Jonas. Is all the pressure on Toronto heading into this series?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. I mean, Tampa's got their back-to-back cups. No one's going to really think twice if they lose this series. But Toronto obviously has so much on the line just given their history. You know, the past 5 playoff defeats, the core, Matthews, Marner, Kyle Dubas, Sheldon Keefe. Like they've built up to this point. They use the regular season to try to springboard themselves into the playoffs to have a better outcome. And they're a really good team. I think there's a little bit of underrating of the Leafs just based on their playoff history. They're a really good team. They have every chance in the world to beat Tampa, but Tampa is obviously, the 2-time champs for a reason.
Joe, and we look at Tampa Bay, and I think we see a little bit of a different team than we've seen in the past. When I ask you a little bit about the supporting cast, Joe, about this Lightning team, Yanni Gourde, Coleman, Goudreau, some of the glue guys that were critical in winning back-to-back Stanley Cups, they're no longer there. Does Tampa still have a good enough supporting cast right now?
I think they do, and they did a great job at the deadline, I think, in kind of supplementing their core. Nick Paul, as you know really well, Ian, the Senators there, has been a really terrific addition to them. He's playing, I think, some key minutes, and he'll be in the penalty kill, and I think he had 14 points in his first 16 games of Lightning. So he'll be a guy. He'll be getting some tough matchups as well. Brandon Hagel, plus some 2 first-round picks and 2 prospects. He helped provide some depth there. So not going to replace the Yanni Gourde line. I think almost like the ghost of the Yanni Gourde line the last couple of years, how good they were with Blake Coleman and Barclay Goudreau. So not the same thing, but they do have some guys that, Kucherov, Stamkos, Point, those are the guys that are probably going to carry them offensively, but they have guys that can score some key clutch goals like Nick Paul has done in the past in World Juniors and World Championships and obviously in Junior.
It's funny, Joe, that you mentioned Kucherov, Point, and Stamkos, because I think there's a lot of star power going into this series for both sides. In fact, I think it's a great collection of some of the best offensive stars in the game. And yet there's this feeling like we might be on the precipice of a physical matchup here, at least when you listen to the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I'll start with you, Joe, on that one. What's going to win out in this series, skill or physicality?
I was about to say both, but I guess, I think what the Lightning are at their best when they're physically engaged. And this is not just like all the scrums or there's nothing about cheap shots or being goons or whatever like that. When they're engaged physically, in the forecheck or just overall against our team's top players, their defense is big and they're heavy and they'll lean on you. That's when they were at their best in the playoff runs, as they were defending and they were being hard to play against. So I think that there'll have to be some physicality here again, especially against Matthews and Marner and guys that haven't done in the playoffs yet, but have been so explosive in the regular season and historic season. So at the end of the day, the Lightning did win the Cup because they had their star players being their stars. I think that the Leafs will have to have their star players being their stars to win this series, of course. So, but there'll have to be some. It won't quite be. I don't know if it's going to be. What did he say? Like borderline violent kind of thing. But it'll definitely be some physicality going on from game one starting now.
Yeah, you know what? And Jonas, that borderline violent comment is the one that obviously got a lot of traction. And we're seeing a little bit in the lineup too. No Jason Spezza. So do the Toronto Maple Leafs believe they can kind of sandpaper their way to a 7-game series win over Tampa?
I think they think so. I'm just not totally sure that this is who they are. Like the line that they're dressing that you're referring to is Kyle Clifford with Wayne Simmons and Colin Blackwell. That's like a line that hasn't played a lot together. Kyle Clifford hasn't played a lot this season. Wayne Simmons has not been particularly effective, for the second half of the season. They're hoping that line can kind of match the physicality, the edge that Tampa tends to play with. It just strikes me that this is not really who they are. And I don't love the idea of changing who you are in some ways in a playoff series. I would have preferred Jason Spezza to be in the lineup, but he was excellent, obviously, in the playoffs for them last year. And actually, if you look at some of the underlying numbers, when Spezza played with Clifford and Blackwell, that line was actually really good. Maybe it'll work. Maybe they feel like that physicality, that edge will give them kind of an advantage in a tense game one. I would rather they have gone a different direction.
Now, the Maple Leafs, for this core, they've all been together. There's going to be a lot of scrutiny on Kyle Dubas, Sheldon Keefe. If you had to pick one player, though, on this team, whether it's Mitch Marner, Jack Campbell, maybe even Austin Matthews coming off a 60-goal season, which is the guy that you think is going to feel the most scrutiny, the most?
Sorry, Ian, I lost you at the end there.
Just wondering which member of the Maple Leafs you think, from a player's perspective, Jack Campbell, Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, is going to be facing the most heat here in the playoffs.
I think you could probably order it any way you want, but I would probably start with Jack Campbell just because he is facing the best goalie in the world. He had an up and down regular season. He was awesome in November. He really struggled from December to basically March. And we've seen in the past playoffs, their goaltending has not been good in important moments, and that can obviously really decide a series. And then obviously my number 2 answer would probably be Mitch Marner, just based on some of the playoff hurdles that he's gone through. He's not scored a while in the playoffs. People have looked at his playoff resume the last couple times around, and it's kind of left them wanting. He's not been productive enough, I think, for the Leafs to be able to win any of these past first round series. You go back actually a few years ago, he was really good against Boston, but that was really early in his career. So Campbell and Marner are kind of the 2 guys for me that I'm really wanting to see how they respond. And then another guy just who you didn't mention is Jake Muzzin, just really struggled with injuries in the second half of the year. And he plays such an important role for the Leafs that if he's not like quite right, they're going to have to kind of go in a different direction.
And a final question here to wrap it up, and I'll go back to you, Joe, on this one. Listen, a few days ago, we didn't know who Tampa's first-round opponent was going to be. It could have been Carolina. They could have switched over, right, and done the crossover to the Metro. Is this the better path for them? I know it's tougher because they got Toronto, then they got Florida, but I guess when you're battle tested, you probably feel pretty good about yourself. How are the Lightning, or maybe how are the fans feeling about this is going to be the path for them, which arguably might be as tough a path as anybody's got to get to the Stanley Cup?
Yeah, yes, fans are teamed by two different things, right? People see the Panthers' historic season and are like, uh-oh. But I think anybody who's on that team doesn't really care who they're going to play. And I think they feel, why not play the best teams early on when you're healthy and you're strong, you have the whole lineup together. Let's play the best teams early and see if we can beat them before things, get really banged up at the end of this playoff. So the Lightning have won 2 cups for a reason. They beat everybody that's been in front of them, so I don't think they're really worried about that. There's some teams they match up maybe better at, per se, and maybe the style of Toronto maybe fits them a little better in terms of the way they play. But, I just think they're happy to be here and 100% healthy. Braden Point's going to play. Ruda's going to play. So at this point, they're just ready to roll after 82 games, dress rehearsal after they played the most important hockey of the year last year in the summer. Now they're ready to get it on and play here for their 3rd straight Stanley Cup. Well,
listen, looking forward. This might be maybe it's going to be the physical bloodbath that some people think. Maybe it's going to be an offensive showcase. Whatever it's going to be, I think it's going to be highly entertaining. Listen, Joe Smith, Jonas Siegel, thanks so much for dropping by this live edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. Look forward to your coverage, and I'm sure we'll hit you guys up real soon.
Thanks, Ian. Jonas, we'll see you soon.
See you,
there
Joe.
We go. Jonas Siegel and Joe Smith getting you set for, it's hard for me to say what is going to be definitively the best series of the first round because we just had Russo and Rutherford on, and I thought that one feels like it's going 7 games. And then you look at Tampa, Toronto, and you're like, man, that one might go 7 games. And then the one that's going to kick off the playoff action on Monday night will feature the Boston Bruins and the Carolina Hurricanes. And all of a sudden, I think there's a lot of people who are thinking that potentially the Boston Bruins could be primed for an upset. I think Fluto Shinzawa is all set to join me here. Sarah Sivian will join us in a moment. Fluto, listen, thanks for doing this. Welcome to the live edition of the podcast. How do we feel about the crossover? I was just talking to Joe Smith about this. Someone was going to have to cross over, whether it was Tampa or Boston. How are the Bruins, or maybe how are Bruins fans feeling about the fact that their path to the Final Four will go through the Metro and not the Atlantic?
Ian, I think they would be feeling good about it if they can get past the first round opponent, right? That's the trick here, because you look at Rangers. Okay, they're quite reliant, not as reliant as they were earlier in the season on Shesterkin. I think they're a very well-rounded team, but it's still pretty goalie reliant. Pittsburgh, who knows when the age starts to show, and who knows what the goaltending situation is for them. So yes, in that sense, okay, Bruins fans probably looking forward to that, but you can't look past this opponent. Got your teeth kicked in for 3 straight games in the regular season, outscored 16-1. Boy, that is looking like an awful matchup for the Bruins just based on the regular season. Now you can say, and the Bruins are saying, well, regular season doesn't mean anything. We're a different team. We have a different defenseman, a number 2 defenseman, Hampus Lindholm, a different goalie. Well, last game they played, this guy named Tuukka Rask was in that, and he's gone. He's on the rocking chair. So a lot has changed for the Bruins, and they are at full health. But still, Carolina, they come with all kinds of speed, and that's going to present a whole lot of problems for the Bruins.
I thought it's interesting you brought up Tuukka Rask in a rocking chair, because you know what? He's out, and all of the pressure now in the spotlight goes to Jeremy Swayman. And you know what? In a year in which I felt like Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond and Trevor Zegras and Michael Bunting and, go down the list, there was a lot of rookies who got a lot of credit. I don't think Jeremy Swayman got a ton of credit, at least nationally. What's the feeling around his ability to maybe, elevate his performance, Fluto, and maybe pull off an upset here?
Well, Jeremy was very good. You'd have to say he's the top rookie goalie of the season, just because he had played. He started off okay, got really hot January, February, and then kind of tailed off, and that left the door open for Linus Ullmark, who will start game 1. So, but the door has certainly not closed on Jeremy. In years past with Tuukka, it was his show the whole time. It was going to be his net, regardless if he let in 10 goals. Yes, he get pulled, but he's going to go right back in the next game. That will not be the case for the Bruins this year. Ullmark will start, and perhaps, who knows how long he'll play. But it was even Steven throughout the regular season, 41 appearances for both Jeremy and for Linus. So why deviate from that in the postseason? Just because it's been the way that this has gone all year. And by the way, 0 NHL playoff starts for Linus, 0 NHL playoff starts for Jeremy. So a whole lot of question marks in goal for the Bruins. But yes, Jeremy is right there knocking on the door, waiting for his chance to play.
I think we've got Sarah Sivian all set to join us here into the conversation. And there we go. We bring her in. Sarah Sivian, thanks. Thanks for dropping by. We were just talking goaltending. And it's funny. I was just talking with Russo and Rutherford. It's all about goaltending. Jonas Siegel, it's all on Jack Campbell. Fluto talked about how there might be a little fluidity with the Boston Bruins goaltending situation. And that brings us to Carolina, where they might have a very, very interesting situation in goal. Can you give our viewers and our listeners a little bit of a sense of where things are at with Freddie Anderson?
Yeah, I'm going to say if you're the Hurricanes, it can't be about goaltending because they cannot worry about that right now. They got to, who knows, there's going to be, Ronta's getting to start game 1 and we'll see how that goes. I think that is much, if you're going to go with somebody that isn't Anderson, it has to be Ranta just because he is going to be the backup no matter what happens. So you have to show him, I have full faith in you, right? Like if he has to be the starter right now, then he can be the backup when Freddie returns, which it doesn't look like obviously not game 1, but it doesn't look like game 2 or 3 either. It could be the end of this series here, or maybe not. I don't know. It is a very fluid situation right now because he mentally needs to be 100%, and he has been going over some of the movements that he does, and it is not where he wants to be right now. So not great vibes there, but they can't be too concerned with goaltending because it just is what it is.
One of the things Fluto mentioned, which I think is a big talking point coming into this series, is that Carolina just dummied Boston in the regular season head to head. Is part of Rod Brindamore's message a little bit about guarding against relying too much on those head-to-head meetings from the regular season?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we asked him about that the other day, and I knew what he was going to say. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. And then he even referenced the Rangers play-in series that the Rangers swept the Hurricanes, and then the Hurricanes beat them in the play-in series. And then the same thing happened with Washington a few years ago. So they've been on the other side of that, and they know how powerful the kind of prove people wrong mentality is. It's almost more powerful than the actual head-to-head regular season matchup. So they got to keep their head on a swivel in that regard and know that it doesn't mean all that much, especially without Freddie, who had amazing numbers during that series.
So I'll tell you what, before we wrap up this conversation, I'm going to go to each of you to ask for your X factor. So Fluto, I'll start with you. I'm looking for somebody beyond the Pastrnak, Marchand, Bergeron, like somebody outside of the obvious that might be a kind of an X factor, swing factor in this series for the Boston Bruins. Who might we want to key in on there?
That's a great question, Ian. I think I'll go with Jake DeBrusk because in these first 2 playoff meetings that the Bruins had with the Hurricanes, 2019 in the Eastern Conference Final and then 2020 in the bubble, they ran their big lines, the big boys, Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak, and there was no even hint of Bruce Cassidy changing that. It's different now. They've got Pastrnak on the second line now with Taylor Hall and Eric Holla. They feel that gives them a better chance in terms of overall balance when it goes up against Carolina. So what does that mean? Well, Jake's going to have to pull his weight on the first line, and he has. He's been good. This is a player that wanted out, still wants out, but has scored 20-plus goals. And playing with Marchand and Bergeron, you're going to get your chances. You're going to get your opportunities, but you're also going to be playing against real good players. So Jake, he can't just be along for the ride. He's got to be contributing. Otherwise, who knows? Maybe the emergency glass gets broken and Pastrnak goes back up to the first line, which is probably not a direction the Bruins want to go in.
So Fluto goes with Jake DeBrusk. Sarah, same question to you. Outside of the obvious, the Ahos and the Svechnikovs and the guys that are at the top of the scoring list for Carolina, who's somebody who might be a little bit of an X factor here for Rod Brind'Amour?
I think Rod keeps saying he loves kind of the rookies because they don't know what they don't know. And sometimes ignorance is bliss in the playoffs. And I've kept asking about Seth Jarvis, who I gave a number 5 nod to in the Calder because I think with more time on ice, he could have done more. And he's going to be on the first line too. And Rod is giving him this opportunity now. He's very elusive. And Jordan Martinook today said he acts like he's 30 years old and he has just a great spirit. I think he can definitely kind of keep the guys younger, even though he has an old mentality. And he's been scoring a lot recently. He comes into the playoffs on a 7-game point streak. So make it 8, I guess.
There we go. Listen, if you're looking for a last minute to pick in your hockey pool, Jake DeBrusk, Seth Jarvis, the way to go. The sneaky picks from Sarah and Fluto. Look, we're going to really enjoy. This is the first game to kick off the entire Stanley Cup playoffs. We're looking forward to it and your coverage of both the Bruins and the Hurricanes. Fluto and Sarah, thanks so much for dropping by.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
All right, there goes Fluto and Sarah, and it's like an old Adams division matchup, right? Old school Whalers Bruins round 1, and that'll be the first game on Monday as we kick off the Stanley Cup playoffs. That's the very first game, puck drop from Carolina tonight. Listen, what we're going to do, we've hit on 3 series, 3 down, 5 to go. When we come back on the other side, I'm really excited for Nashville, Colorado. A lot of people might think that this is a one-sided series, but it is going to give us, I think, an opportunity to look at arguably the 2 best defensemen in the game, or certainly the 2 candidates for the Norris Trophy in Cale Makar, Roman Josi. So Adam Vingan, Peter Baugh standing by. We'll continue on the other side. This is a live edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. We'll get back to the show in a second, but first, have you been treating your butt well lately? Has it actually been going places? No? Then I gotta tell you, you gotta try SeatGeek. In fact, I just downloaded the SeatGeek app for myself because you know what? Me and the family, we're headed down to New York coming up in the month of May, and I want Yankees tickets. And I actually want Broadway tickets too. In fact, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to go see, me and my family, I think we're going to go see Mrs. Doubtfire live. And I just downloaded the SeatGeek app, and there's tons of options there, both at Yankee Stadium and on Broadway for tickets. And so, like, for me, this is great. Like, all the tickets, all in one spot. So whether you're like me looking to go to a Yankees game or a Broadway show, concert, maybe a playoff basketball game, whatever you want. So SeatGeek is going to put all the tickets from all over the place, all over the web into one spot. It's going to make your buying experience super simple. And what I like about this too, okay, this is what I've learned from using SeatGeek this week. They're going to rate every ticket for you in the venue from 0 to 10 to make sure you're getting a good deal. So if you see the green color, that's good. Red, not so good. And right now we got a great deal for you. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase with the promo code NHL Show at SeatGeek.com, or if you're like me, you download the SeatGeek app. Again, that's the promo code NHL Show for $20 off your first SeatGeek order. SeatGeek. Get your seat in a seat and download the app today. With spring in the air, it's a time for renewal and growth, both personally and professionally. As your small business grows, LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs, and that'll allow you to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of more than 800 million people. Then, add your job and the purple #hiring frame to your own LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions are going to make it really easy for you to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and then hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. So, LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. And did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/NHL show. That's linkedin.com/NHL show to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, like I said, 3 series down, 5 to go as we kick off the opening round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. For a lot of people, this is the most fun time of year. 16 teams alive in the Stanley Cup playoffs. We teed up 3 games that are all happening, or 3 series, that are all happening tonight. Nashville, Colorado, though, doesn't get underway tonight. That starts tomorrow, but we're super excited for this one. Let's bring in Adam Vingan and Peter Baugh. They cover the Nashville Predators and the Colorado Avalanche, respectively. Gentlemen, thanks for dropping by this live edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. And Adam, I'm going to start with you. on this one, because you know what? What I like about this series is it's a touch of an old school David and Goliath. We don't really get too many of these underdog against the favorite. There's not a lot of people pulling for Nashville here, but walk us through, Adam, how Nashville could pull off a stunning upset here. How could it happen?
It's going to be difficult if the Predators are without UC Saros and they're preparing to get on the ice in Denver for practice, their first postseason practice. So we'll see if UC Saros attempts to give it a go, but it does not sound promising as of now for his opportunity, for a chance for him, to play in the series, or at least the start of the series. So if UC Saros is out of this series, it really does come down to David Riddick giving the Predators comparable goaltending, which is going to be hard for him to do because UC Saros was an all-star goaltender. He started more games than any goaltender in the National Hockey League this season. He was among the top goalies in the league in terms of goals saved above expected. David Riddick was a sub-replacement level goaltender in limited playing time, I might add, but he was not great in the games he did play. So, without that security blanket in UC Saros, it's going to be hard for them. The one thing I think that the Predators do have to their advantage is their ability to ratchet up the physicality. This Avalanche team certainly has players who are willing to do that. As a team, however, they are not as physical as the Predators. So if the Predators can drag the Avalanche into a proverbial rock fight, I do think that the Predators can make things interesting, but I am having a very difficult time coming up with reasons for optimism if UC Saros is unavailable to play.
And, and Peter, that'll bring the conversation over to you, because so much of the Stanley Cup playoffs are predicated on health. And if you can get your top players all in there and everyone feeling good, that's going to improve your odds. Look, Nashville knows, as Adam just said, if we don't have UC Saros, Nashville is thinking we may not have a chance. Now, where are we at when it comes to Gabriel Landeskog? Because I think that is a huge factor for the Avs, and maybe you can kind of just let us know where things are at with Landeskog.
He's good to go. He spoke today. He's feeling good. He's been skating for about 10 days. He's been a full participant in the last 2 practices, and he should be good to go with no problems. One interesting, I guess, wrinkle is that Nazem Kadri has been sick and has missed the last 2 days of practice. It's a non-COVID illness, but we'll see if that ends up being a point of concern for Colorado and if he'll be able to play.
It's interesting you mentioned Nazem Kadri, Peter. For our listeners who did not read your feature on Nazem Kadri about a week ago, outstanding. Honestly, that's the type of. It's one of those, when you get at the bottom of the comments where people are like, "That's why I subscribe to The Athletic." I read that. I'm like, that's why I love The Athletic. But I do want to focus on Nazem Kadri. Maybe he's going to miss game 1 with the non-COVID illness, as you mentioned. But there's going to be a lot of eyes on him because all we think about is Nazem Kadri and the inability to stay disciplined in the playoffs. It's happened not once, not twice, but thrice. Where are we at? Because this guy legitimately had an all-star caliber season, never been as offensively productive. They need him. Can he keep it in check?
Yeah, I think that's a big question going into this series. And I think that the way the Avalanche look at it is that his suspension last year was a lot different than the one in Toronto, which I think a lot of people, certainly the people in the comments of my story did not like those Avalanche comments, but I can see their perspective where it was against Boston when he was with Toronto. Those were retaliatory plays where he's mad about something that happened, whether it was Jake DeBrusk and him skirmishing all game and all that, or the year before, both retaliatory plays. With Colorado last year, he made a check that they say he missed, and he hit Justin Falk up high. It wasn't retaliatory. He was trying to get him away from the puck. And I think you can see that was the intention. Was it a bad hit? Yes, it 100% was. And he knows that, and he's acknowledged that. I don't think they think that the length of the suspension was fair. But I think they do think that there's a difference between how he got suspended when he's with Toronto and how he got suspended last year with Colorado. And I think that's a really small difference, but I think it can matter because it's not like he lost his cool with Colorado. It was more he made a bad play and it didn't work out. So, but yeah, it's going to be a big question for this postseason. And I think the only way Nazem Kadri can answer it is to just stay on the ice and play the way he's played all season, which has been at an exceptionally high level.
Well, and that exceptionally high level is certainly a good description for both Cale Makar and Roman Josi. I think unequivocally the two best defensemen in the game. Unequivocally, it's going to be a flip of the coin. I think when you look at whenever the awards voting, well, it's going to be finalized today. We won't know the results for a few weeks. But this series is obviously going to go a long way, I think, for a lot of fans and kind of just saying like who had the better season or who's better right now. So I'm going to give each of you an opportunity to kind of just educate our listeners a little bit on the importance of the defenseman that you cover and the type of season that he had. And Adam, I'll start with you on the unbelievable season that Roman Josi had for the Preds.
It was unbelievable, and for a long time he was flirting with 100 points. He slowed down a little bit at the end, which prevented him from getting there, but he just missed. I believe there had been 6 or 7 defensemen in NHL history that had 100 points in the season, either once or multiple times. I may have that number incorrect, but it was a very small group of defensemen. In my opinion, no defenseman in the league is more elite in transition than Roman Josi in terms of his ability to move the puck up ice, as well as his ability in the offensive zone to create scoring chances for himself and his teammates. I'm going to be very interested in seeing how this Norris Trophy vote pans out, but I think you're going to see Roman Josi on a lot of Hart Trophy ballots when it comes to determining value. And that's an interesting conversation about the Norris Trophy, which is by definition for the defenseman that has the greatest all-around ability, and the Hart Trophy, the player most valuable to his team. There is no doubt that Roman Josi was the most valuable defenseman to his team in the National Hockey League. And I saw something the other day, I referenced it in the story that Peter and I did today, that the last time two NHL defensemen with 80-plus points met in the postseason was in 1984 when Paul Coffey's Edmonton Oilers and Dennis Potvin's New York Islanders met in the Stanley Cup final. So it's been decades since we've seen two defensemen of this caliber scoring-wise meet in the postseason, and I think it's going to be incredible to watch the two most electrifying defensemen go head-to-head.
Wow, that is an amazing stat. I love that. Coffey and Potvin from 84, just to give our listeners and viewers a sense of just how rare this is to get two defensemen of this caliber going head-to-head. So, Peter, I'll ask you the same question that I asked Adam, which is just give our listeners a sense of Cale Makar's season, because at one point we did think, hey, maybe this guy could score 30, 35. What was his season like, and what's the case for him to be the Norris Trophy winner?
Yeah, well, I mean, he almost did get 30. He finished with 28, and he had a 29th that hit the post on an empty net. And, well, it was not a 29th. It was almost a 29th. Right. And he also had a shootout winning goal, which, according to me, should count as a goal. I think all shootout winners should count as goals. That's irregardless of the point. I think Cale Makar's biggest case is just his two-way play. Offensively, Josi's probably had a slightly better season, although point production, while Josi has 10 more points, I believe it's 96 to 86 point wise. If you take out secondary assists and just look at primary points, Makar only trails by 2 points. So they're pretty similar in that regard. I think that with Cale, what's interesting is just his defensive growth and how much he's relied upon to go against top competition, which Shayna Goldman and I did a story where she found a way to look at like, if a defenseman plays against top level competition, which is whether they're in the top 2 defensemen on their team in like opposing GSVA when they're on the ice. And Makar and McAvoy both qualified as playing against top competition, and Hedman and Josi did not. I think Makar was on the ice for 30% of the Avs penalty kill time, whereas Josi was only around 13%. So obviously Josi extremely offensively gifted, and I think that it's maybe a bit of an unfair knock that he didn't play both ways because he is so good offensively that clearly it's more valuable for him to start in offensive situations, whether the puck's in the offensive zone or all that. But I think just in terms of the margin of difference between the two is pretty slim. And I think Cale Makar had a really, really impressive defensive year that from my perspective, probably puts him over Yossi. But it's, I mean, obviously two incredible defensemen, and I think it's hard to go wrong with either.
Yeah, no, it's so well said. I think they both had Norris Trophy caliber seasons. We'll see how the votes come in, but I'm sure if you ask both of them, they would trade that Norris Trophy for a playoff series win. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Yossi against Makar, just one of the many matchups to watch in that series. Nashville and Colorado. Adam and Peter, thanks so much for dropping by the live edition of the Athletic Hockey Show.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Adam.
There we
go.
You
too, Peter.
Adam Vingan and Peter Baud dropping by. And yeah, hey, listen, if as Adam says, if Rittich ends up stealing some games, that might be the ultimate David versus Goliath situation there if Nashville can pull it off. We're talking about Norris Trophy winners, and it's funny because the talk all season long was Cale Makar, Roman Josi. The reigning Norris Trophy winner is Adam Fox, almost like a forgotten guy, because the New York Rangers, when you talk about them, it was all about Shesterkin, all about Igor Shesterkin. And that is going to be, I think, the story coming into this series, as I believe hopefully we've got Arthur Staple, Josh Yohe standing by. Look at this. Perfect. It's an old school Patrick Division matchup, isn't it? Penguins and the Rangers, and we love that. Arthur Staple, let's start with you. And by the way, Arthur also does the Garden Faithful podcast. We got to always give that a plug, because Rangers fans I know are certainly tuned into that. So a lot of people are wondering about Shesterkin right now, Arthur, because you look at the month of March, 916 save percentage, and everyone was like, uh-oh, Igor Shesterkin has come back down to earth. And I think a lot of people are just wondering, where is his game at as we enter the Stanley Cup playoffs?
I think he's going pretty well right now, Ian. You know, he rallied back, I think, in April and had a few good starts. Him and Alexander Georgiev posted 3 straight shutouts at one point in April. So I don't think there's too much concern about that. Igor talked today after the Rangers' last practice, and you know, he had a week off. He last played on Tuesday against Carolina, which was a loss that kind of turned the tide for Gerard Gallant in terms of resting guys for the last 2 games, and Shesterkin was one of them. So he hasn't played in a week, and we said, you know, you happy to have that extra rest? And he kind of smiled and said, we'll see. You know, he's a pretty easygoing guy, the way that he talks. He's very intense. I think a week of work with Benoit Allaire, who helped Henrik Lundqvist become the goalie he became, I don't think is too bad a thing. So I don't think anybody's too concerned around the Rangers about Igor Shesterkin and where his game's at, given what he's done over the course of the whole season.
That is not the case, though, Josh, for the goaltending situation in Pittsburgh. Is, of course, looks like Tristan Jarry is at least going to miss the first 2 games of this series, maybe more. Maybe you can just let's start with that. Fill us in on the latest on Pittsburgh's number 1 goaltender.
Yeah, guys, Tristan Jarry has a broken bone in his foot, and we may see him if this series goes 6 or 7 games. I suppose it's a possibility, but from everything I've been told, you can expect to see Casey DeSmith for the bulk of this series. It's not ideal for the Penguins. Jarry, despite his playoff blow-up against the Islanders last year, has been very good this season. The good news for the Penguins is that Casey DeSmith in the last month has been outstanding. He is playing his best hockey of the season after a really bad start, but that does not take away from the fact that this is a huge goaltending mismatch. You've got the guy who is probably the best goalie in the world right now against a guy in Casey DeSmith who is a very good backup. Let's be honest. It's a huge problem for the Penguins. DeSmith has never played in the postseason, and it was already probably a rough matchup for the Penguins. This does not help matters one bit.
Yeah, it's funny that you talk about that, Josh, because look, over the years, we've seen the Penguins seemingly play this underdog card, and we're like, no, I'm not falling for it again. But now, this time again, and I've read a lot of your stuff lately, and again, is it fair to say that there's some degree of, I guess, pessimism and skepticism about this Pittsburgh team's ability to just win around here?
Oh yeah, I can tell you the pessimism rather in Pittsburgh is at an all-time high. This is a franchise that has won so much in the last 15 years. Since Crosby, Letang, and Malkin have been in Pittsburgh, no team has won more in the regular season. No team has won more in the postseason than the Pittsburgh Penguins. But the fact is, they've lost 4 consecutive series, and they are not going into the postseason playing well. They have been so lethargic for the past month, and maybe an optimist would say, well, they knew these games didn't really matter. They're just waiting to flip on the switch. Well, maybe that's the case. I'm not really buying it. I just don't like the way this team looks right now. they look old all of a sudden. And I haven't really said that about the Penguins much over the years, but all of a sudden they just look like they have hit a wall. Yes, they still have talent, but I don't expect them to win this series, quite frankly. And I don't think many people in Pittsburgh do. They smell a little bit like decay, like the Kings and the Blackhawks. And everyone says every year they're going to be the Kings and the Blackhawks eventually. And it's amazing what they've done. They've lasted a lot longer than those two great teams did. But I wonder if we're not moving into that territory a little bit.
Arthur, I just had Adam and Peter on from Nashville and Colorado, and we were just talking about the wonderful seasons Cale Makar and Roman Josi had, and I just said, it kind of feels like Adam Fox has been forgotten. Like he was last year's Norris Trophy winner, and he didn't even kind of get on the radar for a lot of people in the conversation this year. Where's Adam Fox's game at right now as we head into this series, and could he be a difference maker for the Rangers?
I mean, he certainly could. He didn't have a Norris Trophy winning season, but he had 74 points, I think, 63 assists. He was in the top 15 in the league in assists. Those are Brian Leetch type numbers around here with the Rangers that we haven't seen in a long, long time from a defenseman. So certainly his ability to run a power play, and a power play as lethal as the Rangers' top unit has been, that's still pretty high end. And, he plays the most minutes on the D. He got hurt right before their 2-week break in February, took a hard hit in a game in Columbus, and came back after 2 weeks off and didn't quite look like, Norris Trophy winning Adam Fox or even 80% of that guy. But he's still a guy who can play 22, 23 minutes a night. He's out there killing penalties when he needs to. And I think the thing that's allowed the Rangers to feel okay about him maybe taking a small step back is the emergence of Keandre Miller on the second pair with Jacob Trouba. Miller is in his second year, struggled a little bit at the beginning of the year, but a guy who's 6'4", who skates well, has a little bit of offense to his game, and incredible reach and footwork. That Miller-Trouba pair, I think, really has been their number one pair. And always when you're facing the Penguins in the playoffs, you got to pick your poison, right? You either got to try to shut down Sidney Crosby or shut down Evgeny Malkin, or sometimes guys shut down neither of them, and the Penguins go stomping onto a Stanley Cup. Well, this year, I think the Rangers under Gerard Gallant, they've got a top four defense in Fox and Ryan Lindgren and Miller and Trouba that they feel like they can match them up against anybody, and especially on home ice in the Garden the first two games, they're going to get the matchups they want in terms of their D facing off against Crosby or Malkin. And if they can kind of establish that in those first two games with Shesterkin playing behind them, they feel really good about how they're going to play this series.
Josh, when you hear Arthur talk about Crosby and Malkin, as you mentioned, look, they're getting towards the end of their career here. They're certainly not the guys that they were 4 or 5 years ago, but my goodness, they're still dangerous, especially Sid has just had a dynamite year. Is there a feeling, though, in Pittsburgh that with Malkin headed to free agency, with Letang headed to free agency, this is the last great ride for the Penguins trio?
Yeah, there is. Crosby's still under contract for 3 more years, but Malkin and Letang are unrestricted free agents. I don't think they'll both be back. If I had to bet money, I bet Malkin will be back. I don't know that Chris Letang will. There is certainly that sense. Crosby has had a great season. He had a slow start. He had COVID. He had wrist surgery, missed training camp. From about the beginning of December until now, he's been one of the best players in the league. He's not quite as great as he was maybe 10 years ago, but to me, he's still one of the 5 or 6 best players in hockey. Malkin is interesting. He scored 20 goals in 41 games. That sounds great. And he is still lethal on the power play. The power play very much still goes through him. 5-on-5, he has really struggled. He hasn't put up much offense 5-on-5. He's been a mess defensively, a team worst -10. I know we don't like that statistic, but when it's one of the best players on the team that's the team worst minus, that gets your attention. He's not been good 5-on-5 at all. Needs to be way better against the Rangers in that department. So it'll be fascinating to watch. Crosby and Malkin love playing at the Garden. They always play well there. Malkin in particular. Malkin, to me, is kind of the X factor for the Penguins. If he can have kind of a vintage Malkin performance in this series, and I won't put it past him, he's usually great in the playoffs, maybe the Penguins have a puncher's chance. You kind of know what you're getting from Sid all the time, and he'll be terrific. Malkin, he's always a little bit of a mystery.
And a final question to you, Arthur, as Josh mentions, Malkin could be an X factor. I just want to ask you about Alexis Lafreniere, who he played in 79 regular season games, and I'm a couple of years ago, if you said, hey, in 2022, the Rangers are going to make the Stanley Cup playoffs, you would figure that the number one overall pick from 2020 would be a catalyst, a driving force. What's his role like right now on this team? And can he have an impact at all in the playoffs for the Rangers?
He sure could. He's played in a lot of different spots this year because of COVID or injuries. He's bounced up and around the top nine, even played a little bit fourth line at the beginning of the year. And he handles it all with kind of the nonplussed air of a Zoomer. He seems to just not be fazed by too much. And he did put up 19 goals. He had a really good last couple weeks of the season, I think, which for him might have been important just because the confidence could have waned a little bit. And he's going to probably start tomorrow night in game one on a kind of a kid line on the third line with Philip Hedl in the middle and Capo Caco on the right side. So you've got a couple of top two picks from that Rangers rebuild on a third line that might end up being the line that gets the fewest minutes. Gerard Gallant has kind of used Alexis Lafreniere very sparingly 5-on-5. He doesn't get a ton of power play time because that top unit is so lethal. So he's got to do a lot with a little. He's probably the first guy that gets moved up if there's some issues, injuries or otherwise in the top six. But for now, I think as a third line, they're going to get some sheltered minutes at home and maybe with those, they're incredibly good top two lines with Mika Zibanejad in line one and Ryan Strome and Artemi Panarin on line two. And a fourth line with Barclay Goodrow and Kevin Rooney. That's going to be kind of their de facto checking line. That third line with Lafreniere could sneak in and find some cracks in the Penguins D and maybe provide some offense that the Rangers certainly would love to have. They get enough from their top six to do okay and finish where they finish with 110 points. But if Lafreniere can kind of be the play driver of that line with two guys that have had up and down seasons, then I think that makes the Penguins problems this series even greater.
Yeah, this is going to be great. Like I said, anytime you get an old Patrick division matchup, it's great. Anytime you get first overall picks involved and Hart Trophy candidate goaltenders, this is going to be a lot of fun. Josh Yohe, Arthur Staple, thanks for dropping by this live edition of the Athletic Hockey Show.
You got it, Ian.
All right, there they go. And this should be a lot of fun because, the Rangers have arguably the best goalie on the planet. They've got a 50-goal scorer in Chris Kreider and Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad and Adam Fox. And it's going to be this should be a lot of fun. I thought it was interesting, too, to hear Arthur, who, by the way, once again, a little plug for Arthur's Garden Faithful podcast, talk about a kid line with Alexis Lafreniere, because I think the original kid line, when you think about the kid line in the playoffs, you think about the Oilers winning the Stanley Cup in 1990, and they had Marty Jelena and Adam Graves and Joe Murphy. That was the original kid line that helped the Oilers win the Stanley Cup in 1990. And speaking of the Oilers, we're going to connect with Daniel Nugent-Bowman to set up that series against the LA Kings coming up on the other side. We've run through 5 series, got 3 to go as we continue on with this Monday live edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. We'll get right back to the podcast in a second, but first, I've always been a fan of Stance socks. I mean, how can you not love these things? Okay, they're versatile, they're colorful, they make for great gifts, and right now, Stance is expanding outside of the sock game. They've got a full active apparel line. So we're talking sweatpants, joggers, hoodies, and more. Best part, all of the clothing has stayed true to Stance's unique quality. So you're going to get all of the comfort and creativity of Stance in the past, and you're not going to believe what Stance has in store for you now. They're bringing in that color, the comfort, creativity, we'll call it the 3 C's, with the launch of this new active apparel line. And I've got a whole bunch of Stance socks, okay? And I love these things. I've got colorful socks that I can wear kind of, if I'm dressing up. I got athletic socks. And what I like about them, they're super comfortable. That's what I probably like about them the most. But we're talking about their full range of shirts and hoodies and hats and everything now, sweatpants, joggers, and it's a full range of fits and prints and fabrics and fun. We want you to embrace a life of superior comfort, and you can be creative with your expression, okay? Everything that is truly stitched different. So the philosophy with Stance, you don't have to sacrifice your own individual style for comfort. Like I said, with going to the gym with my Stance socks, I love them. They're the low-cut kind. Put them in there. They got a little bit of color. They can pop, but boy, oh boy, are they comfortable when I'm working out. So Stance has you covered. And right now, if you can head on over to stance.com, you're going to get 15% off your first purchase when you use the promo code ATHLETIC at checkout. So again, that is stance.com, promo code ATHLETIC, you're going to get 15% off your first purchase. Enjoy the color and comfort of a life less ordinary with Stance. Stitched different. All right, we're back at it here. 5 series down, 3 to go, and we just teed up a couple of series that won't start on Monday, but we do have one more that will tee up for tonight, for Monday night. It's the late one. It is the Edmonton Oilers at home to the Los Angeles Kings. Daniel Nugent-Bowman, Lisa Dillman, who cover the Oilers and the Kings respectively. There we go. We got them all set. Both of you, listen, first of all, thanks for joining this live edition of the Athletic Hockey Show.
Well, you're very welcome.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
Yeah, great to have you both. Sean McIndoe, Down Goes Brown, and I had some fun with this last week of the podcast, saying, boy, Mike Smith and Jonathan Quick met in that Western Conference final in 2012, Arizona, LA. 10 years later, it's them again hooking up in a Stanley Cup Playoff series. Lisa, let me start with you, and we've such a theme today has been goaltending. I mean, where's Jonathan Quick's game at? Where's LA at when it comes to their goaltending right now?
It's not quite on Golden Pond, but it is fascinating to have a 40-year-old and a 36-year-old doing battle again. Jonathan, it's a really interesting story. He didn't start the season opener. Cal Peterson did, which seems like years ago rather than months ago against the Vegas Golden Knights. And it really did seem like the torch had been passed. But in the last month, Quick has been like the Quick of old. His demeanor, his play on the ice and his demeanor off the ice, tight, one-word answers, almost surly. And when you see him like that, he's really ready for the postseason experience. So it's been quite a turning back the clock type feel with him. And I think Kings fans are seeing, we're all seeing. I'm reminded of 10 years ago, 8 years ago, the Quick of old.
Yeah, 2012, 2014, he was just dynamite and backstopping LA to a couple of Stanley Cups. Mike Smith is an interesting one, Daniel, because I think at the trade deadline, we were all screaming, trade for a goalie. And then they didn't. And then Mike Smith turned back the clock. I mean, how much confidence is there in Smith to get the job done here? And not just maybe win a series, but maybe take Edmonton 3 rounds deep and beyond.
Yeah, I'll do a little shameless promotion because I did write about Mike Smith this morning for The Athletic, and I think the main thing with him is just getting healthy. I mean, the first half of the year, he played about 5 games, and then when he came back post All-Star break, he was really battling it. He hadn't really returned to full health, and talked to some of his his mentors, his goalie coaches, people that know him well. And they're saying you're seeing a lot of Mike Smith on his stomach, which is a telltale sign that he was not comfortable in the net. Second star of the month for April with a .951 save percentage and 2 shutouts. I've been playing pretty well a little bit before that too. And, I don't think anyone, as you mentioned, Ian, heading into the trade deadline, if we were saying Mike Smith is going to be the starting goaltender of the Edmonton Oilers with home ice advantage, I don't think anyone would have thought that. And here we are. It's a real testament to the way he has played over the last, month, 6 weeks or so, and getting his game back on track. He's playing just as well as he did last season when he finished 7th in Vezina Trophy voting, I should say. And he's done really shaped his game over the last 2 years to really turn back the clock and be at his best. As a 38-year-old and now pushing 40, he just did turn 40 in March. So he's a real X factor for these Oilers, because if everyone knows what they have up front, and if the goaltending could stand up, there's a potential for this team to go on a bit of a run here.
Lisa, for a long time, LA was kind of hanging out with Anaheim and maybe, Detroit and Buffalo and Ottawa at the bottom of the standings. And they took a quantum leap forward this season, qualifying for the playoffs. Is there a feeling like the Kings are just playing with house money here, that this is just going to be a learning experience for the kids? The older guys get another, taste of playoff action, but really the LA Kings are just kind of happy to be here, and whatever happens, happens.
Well, somebody actually did use that phrase in availability the last couple of days, house money. And of course, players and coaches will say what you expect them to say. We're not just here just to be here to have escaped the lottery club. Ian and I have been members, but they're saying all the things that you expect a team to say. And let's face it, they are the underdogs. But yeah, I think they're also viewing it. There's a short-term picture. There's a long-term picture. Short-term, obviously, it's right in front of us. But this is a time for the young kids to get the experience. I mean, they have 4 of the top 6 defensemen are playing in their first playoff game ever. This is a wildly inexperienced group when it comes to playoff experience. So they've had those games down the stretches, 15, 20 games this season, the final games to get in this position. And now they're viewing this as a big stepping stone for the organization and the kids going forward.
Daniel, I'm curious. We talked about Mike Smith and him maybe exceeding some expectations. I think the same could be said for Evander Kane. I think a lot of us looked at Edmonton. They were a struggling hockey team, and we thought, oh my goodness gracious, you're adding this combustible part in Evander Kane. This thing could just explode. And instead, Evander Kane's been really good. So why has it worked for him, and how big of a factor can he be for them in the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, he's been the perfect fit for these Oilers, just because he fits in so well with the top 6. What they really lacked, they didn't have anyone of his skill set, anyone of his grit, that type of power forward that quite frankly is lacking around the NHL these days. And when you put Evander Kane next to Connor McDavid, which he has been for the most part, he has played a little bit with the Leon Draisaitl as well. But I mean, those are 2 of the top, 3-5 centermen in the National Hockey League. You can put Evander Kane beside one of those guys, and this just had the real potential for things to work out here in Edmonton. And he's been a real catalyst in their turnaround. Of course, everyone wondered about the off-ice stuff, but I think the real key for Evander Kane was that this was a real show me opportunity for him. If he did something untoward and kind of ruin this chance, it could have been strike 3 for him in the National Hockey League. And he certainly has done nothing to do anything wrong, I should say, here in Edmonton, and has been a real driving force with more than 20 goals in half a season's work.
I think, Lisa, if the LA Kings are able to win this series, I think a lot of us would look at it as an upset. I think Edmonton goes into this not only with home ice advantage, but they're, I think, largely viewed as the favorite. But if you go back to last year, Philip Deneau was with a team that was considered a heavy underdog in round 1, and Deneau was just shutting down some Toronto big guns. So realistically speaking, Lisa, is there any way that Philip Deneau can do this again, reach into the hat and pull out another rabbit here and maybe shut down Connor McDavid?
Oh, I think he's certainly capable of it. And I think as well as I expected him to play, I thought it was like the most impactful offseason move they made, getting him via free agency. But I don't think anybody could have expected the offense he provided, career high in goals, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, he's shown he can, do it time and time again. So I think that he has the impact. He's taken some of the pressure off Anze Kopitar offensively, defensively, and he's also allowed them to slot other players lower down the lineup to strengthen the bottom 6. So the man is up for the task. He was really loose today in availability and making jokes, and somebody asked him a question. They said, could you repeat the answer for us in French? And he said, well, as long as you ask the question in French. And so you can tell he's loose. He's feeling good about things. But I sense there's a there's a lot of inner strength there in this guy.
Yeah, he was just great. Remember last year with the pizza and the press conferences, he had a great kind of feel about him. Daniel,
no pizza today, unfortunately.
No pizza today. Let me wrap it up, Daniel, by asking you this, because look, Todd McClellan, head coach of the LA Kings, used to be behind the bench for, of course, the Edmonton Oilers. And the Oilers have had a revolving door of head coaches over the years. And yet it looks like Jay Woodcroft has got the magic elixir here. So what has Woodcroft done behind the bench in the last 10 weeks or so to get this ship righted, to give them home ice advantage and finally give the Oilers a little bit of stability here?
Yeah, and of course, as probably a lot of hockey fans know anyway, that Jay Woodcroft is a long-time, assistant coach of Todd McClellan, a disciple of him. It was Todd McClellan who gave Jay Woodcroft his first real chance at head coaching. He was the video coach of the Red Wings before, and when McClellan got the head coaching job in San Jose, he brought Woodcroft along with him, promoting him from a video coach to an assistant coach, and obviously they were on the same staff here in Edmonton too. So. Yeah, they know each other quite well. And Jay Woodcroft, I would say, has really turned this team around. They were a below average team, I think, to put it charitably, at 5-on-5 before Woodcroft's arrival. They really struggled defensively, and they put a real emphasis on that side of the game. Back checking through the neutral zone, angling guys off through the neutral zone, trying to create turnovers there to counterattack offensively. And Jay Woodcroft brought his right-hand man along from Bakersfield, and that being former longtime NHL defenseman Dave Manson, to join the coaching staff. And Manson's really put an emphasis on having defensemen stand up the oncoming rush at the blue line, so not allowing clear cut chances with the oncoming rush coming right into the zone. And that was a real problem before. The Oilers defense would back up to the top of the circle, sometimes the hash marks, and just allow these clear cut chances on the goaltenders. And so that's really helped change the course of the Oilers season. I mean, they have the third highest points percentage since Dave Manson and Jay Woodcroft arrived here in Edmonton on February 10th, their first game being the 11th. Only Calgary and Florida are ahead of them, and that's some pretty good company. So that's reason to believe, as you mentioned, Ian, that there's some optimism here with this Oilers team and with the head coach Jay Woodcroft, who does need a new contract this summer, but we all expect that if the Oilers are to win the series and do well this playoff series, that's a foregone conclusion that he'll be back with a longer term deal behind the bench.
Well, Daniel Nugent-Bowman, Lisa Dillman, thanks so much for dropping by. Looking forward to your coverage, both of you, of the Kings and the Oilers in round number 1. Thanks for dropping by, and enjoy the series.
Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right, there goes Daniel Nugent-Bowman and Lisa Dillman. Just do a terrific job covering the Oilers and the Kings, respectively. And if Edmonton can advance out of that series, like a lot of people are hoping, it might set up for a Battle of Alberta as the Calgary Flames are taking on the Dallas Stars. And that's going to be the next series that we tee up here. As the Dallas Stars and Calgary, we weren't sure if these two teams were going to meet. It took until the final day of the regular season, really on Friday. It looked like maybe Dallas was going to get Colorado. Not the case. They get the Calgary Flames. And I think we've got Saad Yousuf and Haley Salvian. Do we have them both? Look at this. Unbelievable. We get them both into this live edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. And Haley, by the way, thank you so much for joining your own show. We are really, truly honored that you did this. And she froze. Look at that. She froze, Saad. Okay, listen, maybe we'll have to get Haley back here in a second. I can see your video's moving. You're good to go. And in fact, I enjoyed your piece, Saad. You and Haley kind of did a preview of, kind of teaching your audience in Dallas a little bit about the Calgary Flames, right? Because we didn't know who the opponent was going to be. Here's my question for you. Let me start with this. Who's going to shut down Johnny Gaudreau, Elias Lindholm, and Matt Tkachuk? Arguably the best line in hockey right now. Like, I think if a lot of people had to pick one line, they would go with Gaudreau, Lindholm, Tkachuk. So how does Dallas have an answer for that?
Yeah, that's the big question. And first, before I start, I just want to say Haley is an absolute rock star because she is out there at Stars practice. I wasn't able to make it to Calgary today, so I'll be there tomorrow. But Haley was able to get out there and make sure that we were covered on all that. But no, that is the big question. And honestly, there's two ways that Rick Bowness can go about it, and he hasn't really shown his hand on which way he's going to go. He can either match up the Stars top line, which, you talk about top lines in the NHL. Calgary's probably the top one, but Dallas's top line is not far behind with Rope Hans, Jason Robertson, and Joe Pavelski. I think they match up well defensively, but the question is going to be the Stars top line is relied on so much for offense that do you want to really take their energy and their time away from where they can contribute offensively for the Stars, where the Calgary's top line of Gaudreau is going to be in the offensive zone a lot, do you want to waste Rope, Hintz, Robertson, and Pavelski in the defensive zone? And then you don't have any opportunity. The Stars don't have much depth on their roster, so they're not going to be able to generate a lot of scoring. And so that's the question. So it's going to be either that line or the Stars checking line of Michael Raffl, Radek Faksa, and Luke Glendening. That's what Bowness has done mostly. They're not a great line. I know they're the checking line, but they even them, they don't really, I guess, shut opponents down. So that's going to be interesting. Like this whole I guess dynamic is why, after all, the Stars of the 7th seed and the Calgary is, division champs.
All right, I think we've got Haley back from the technical issues. There we go. Look at that. She's back. Let me ask you this, because it really took till the final Friday of the regular season. You didn't know. It looked like it was going to be Nashville. That would have been a really spicy series. It's Dallas. How are Calgary fans feeling about getting the Dallas Stars in round one?
Yeah, well, you know what? I think that there was always a possibility that it was going to be one or the other. I think, talking to the players too, they knew that they were going to get off the plane from that Winnipeg game, and it was either going to be Dallas or Nashville that they were playing against. And, for me personally, I thought that the gap between a UC Saros-less Predators and a fully healthy Dallas Stars was big enough to say that Nashville would have been the better matchup for Calgary. UC Saros is out. He's not likely to play in game one. I believe that's still what we've heard out there. And, he's the MVP of that team this year. I mean, Nashville has so many dangerous players, though, that they still make me nervous. Matt Duchene and Philip Forsberg are 40-plus goal scorers. Roman Josi has had an excellent season, a Norris Trophy, potentially Hart Trophy candidate season. I thought Ryan Johansson was a better second-line center, at least offensively, than Michael Backlund. So there was a lot of little matchup things about this Nashville and Calgary that could make you a little bit nervous, even without UC Saros. So I think Dallas on paper is the better matchup for the Flames. Saad was talking about how they don't have a ton of depth. They've got one of the most productive lines in the league with Hintz, Robertson, and Pavelski. And Pavelski is turning 38 this summer and having, probably the most productive year of his career. And he's having a really big influence on the young guys on that team. I think on paper, like I said, Dallas is the easier, quote unquote, matchup for the Calgary Flames. But, this is a Dallas team that went to the Cup final in the bubble year. They have 5 playoff series wins. In the last 7 years, they've missed the playoffs a couple times, but that's still more playoff success than the Calgary Flames have had. And that's something that if you ask the Flames players and Daryl Sutter, that's something that gives the Stars an advantage, because guys in that room have been there and done that. And yes, Ben and Sagan didn't have great regular seasons. There's question marks up and down that lineup, but and I asked Rick Bowness this about those two players specifically at practice today. Where are they at? And he said, yeah, they're disappointed in their regular season. They weren't great, but this is different. It's a clean slate. You could have an amazing regular season. You can have a terrible regular season. It does not matter, because now it's the playoffs. It's best of 7, and you can rise to the occasion or you can't. So there's lots of guys in that locker room in Dallas who could rise to the occasion now, and they have. And I think Ben and Sagan, regardless of what they did in the regular season, makes some Flames fans kind of nervous, because they've played pretty good against Calgary in the past.
It's funny that Haley mentions, Saad, that the playoffs is a time when you can make your reputation, make a name for yourself. And I'm wondering if this is the opportunity for Jason Robertson to make a name for himself nationally. Like, maybe you can give us an idea of just how good this young man is, because I don't think enough people know how good he has been for the Dallas Stars. And if it wasn't such a crowded field, I'm sure he'd probably get a little bit more love in that Hart Trophy conversation.
Yeah, actually, we were talking about that with, I think I was talking about that with, a couple of other writers, Shayna Goldman. Like, we were talking about, and like Dom, like, they have all these different metrics and ways that they measure the Hart. And like, whether you look at like Huberdeau in Florida and obviously like Austin Matthews and everything like that. And when you look at the pure definition of most valuable, without Jason Robertson, the Stars are nowhere near the playoffs. I mean, they're not in the playoffs, but I don't even think they're fighting for the playoffs down the stretch. Like, this was a 41 goal scorer for a team that literally, I mean, they just scoring goals is such a tall task for them. So I think that when you look at the way Robertson has been able to produce, and Hintz as well, but Hintz kind of did break out into the playoffs before, like whether that was 2019 against Nashville and the Blues, and then the 2020 bubble. But you're right, this is Robertson's big chance, and this is the big thing about him is, the knock on him was his skating and things like. He just has a knack for finding ways to score. Like it doesn't always have to be on the rush. It doesn't always have to be on the power play, but he just finds a way. He has great hands. He has great stick work, and you kind of see that throughout. And I think this is a big chance for him. The thing is, he just doesn't seem to put a lot of pressure on himself. And I think that is something that will serve him well. So I think that's a big plus for the Stars, and honestly, I think it's a big plus for the NHL too, because I think Jason Robertson is one of the most marketable players around the league in terms of his personality and everything like that. So I think Robertson, the Stars, and the NHL in general could benefit from that.
Hey, speaking of marketable commodities, I think Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk would fall into that category. To wrap up this conversation, Haley, let me ask you this. Is there anything that Gaudreau and Tkachuk, who are coming off 100-point regular seasons, can do in the playoffs that will drastically alter their contractual situations? Matthew is a restricted free agent, Johnny Gaudreau, an unrestricted free agent. Is there anything they can do that will really alter things, the value of their deal? Or are people pretty much set in knowing exactly what these guys are probably worth?
It's a good question. I think it depends on who you ask, right? I think there's probably some people in this market who are going to be inclined to say that Johnny Gaudreau is not as valuable as they thought he was if he can't produce in the postseason. Some people will probably say that about Matthew Tkachuk as well. But I also think there's another side of it too. If the Flames cannot have success in the postseason with one of the best teams they've had in a long time, are Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk going to want to lock in long-term in a market where they don't know if they can get it done? I think there's two sides to that coin. I think it really depends who you ask. I think, I did a story, I guess a couple of months ago now, about Matthew's future in Calgary. And I think one of the most important things for him is, having success with his team. Like, this is a player who wants to win. And if you can't win in Calgary, maybe that sways what he wants to do long term. Maybe that sways what Johnny Gaudreau wants to do long term. I think there's so many different things that are going to go into those contract extensions that it's hard to just say that, if they can't play really well in the playoffs, well, then it's all over, or well, they're going to sign for cheap. Because I think if Johnny Gaudreau stays and he gets the contract that people believe he might in this market, are they going to have enough money for Matthew and Mangiapane and Shillington and everyone else they have to re-sign? Or if Johnny leaves, is someone like Matthew going to say, what's my long-term future look like in Calgary without Johnny Gaudreau, who is the single most skilled player on this hockey team? So I do think there's an element to it that if they don't produce in the playoffs, maybe their value goes down a little bit, because that's the time when you got to prove it. This is different. This is what it's all about, right? You want to win. You need those players to step up. And if they can't, maybe they're not as valuable as they thought. But I don't know if that's because, you see the other side of it too. Look at how much money Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow made by showing how valuable they are to their team in the postseason. Those aren't the most skilled players in the league. Those aren't the Tkachuks and the Gaudreaus, but those, well, I guess Gaudreau spelled a different way. But those are guys who are incredibly valuable when it matters. So I think there's going to be elements of that, but I don't think you can narrow it down to just one thing. I just think there's going to be so much that goes into it.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Again, just trying to see what Dallas can do to shut down Gaudreau, Lindholm, Tkachuk might be the key to that series. Listen, Haley and Saad, thanks for dropping by. We got to move along, but enjoy the series. And Haley, it's always great when you decide to drop by the Monday edition of the podcast.
I was at the rink from 10 a.m. until 2:30. Okay.
There's all right.
Fine.
Awesome.
I was picking up Sod slack. He couldn't get on an airplane soon enough, so I had to hang around Stars practice.
Yeah.
Jason Robertson is lovely. I feel like we had the scrum that is cool surfer dude California vibe, says everything, there's no filter. Rick Bones is great. I'll hang around Stars practice over talking to Ian any day.
There you go. Okay. I got to leave it there, though, guys, because you know what? I got to move on. I'm so sorry. Maybe you guys can continue this conversation offline. I got to get to Tarek El-Bashir here because he's got a hard out here coming up. So again, Haley Salvi and Saad Youssef, thanks for dropping by this live edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. All right, so we are going to get to one last series. We've teed up 7, and now it's 8. Remember Daniel Nugent-Bowman said the 3 best teams in the NHL for the last couple of months have been Edmonton, Calgary, and the Florida Panthers. To help tee up the Panthers, the Washington Capitals, as I mentioned, Tarek El-Bashir is all set, ready to join us. We've got a couple of minutes with him. Tarek, let me start with this question. Everyone wants to know, how's Alexander Ovechkin doing? He was banged up late in the season, that shoulder ailment against Toronto. What percentage of health do we expect Alex Ovechkin to be at for Game 1?
I think it's really difficult to say what percentage of health he's going to be at, but he is healthy enough to suit up. I've watched him very closely over the last 2 practices. He looks to me like he's been going 8/10, 9/10 in practice. The thing that really stood out to me was the last 2 days. Once practice was over, he and Nicholas Backstrom went to one end of the ice, and he just hammered one-timers. And if your shoulder is still bothering you, the day before Game 1, you're not going to be hammering one-timers. So I think he's going to be good to go. This is a little bit of deja vu for the Capitals. Remember, he was banged up at the end of last season. He had groin and back injuries. Missed 7 of 8 games down the stretch. Played in the finale. Suited up in the playoffs. He wasn't 100%. I think he ended up having 2 goals and 2 assists, but he wasn't quite himself. So the thing to watch tomorrow night in Game 1 is, what percentage is he at? Because this Capitals team isn't going to be long for the playoffs if OB is at 75%.
One of the things, and I talked to Lisa Dillman about this, about LA going into their series. They're playing with house money. Not a lot of people are picking them to win. Is that the same mentality or feel around the Capitals, that externally not a lot of people are picking them to win, but are they using a kind of us against the world mentality here going into this series?
Ian, I don't think that's them. That's not how they're wired. Basically, the message that they've been putting out there for the last month is just get in the tournament. That they believe they're as dangerous as any team. I don't know if that's in fact the case. They certainly have some weaknesses. They're getting older at some key positions. Their young goaltenders have really struggled here over the last month. But you talk to leadership, and they feel like they got as good a chance as anyone. I polled for an article that's in The Athletic today, 5 people from around the league: a head coach, an assistant coach, a personnel manager, an agent, and a pro scout. And, you would think a President's Trophy winning team facing wild card number 2, that it would be a pretty well, across the board. Oh yeah, the Panthers are going to wipe the ice with the Capitals, and it wasn't that. A few of the people said the Panthers have their weaknesses, and this is a wily veteran Capitals team that's been kind of embarrassed by their postseason showing since they won the Stanley Cup in 2018, and they think they're going to be pretty determined to prove people wrong. For the first time in a little bit, they're healthy going into the postseason. Alex, we'll see how he is, but for the most part, they are healthy. They're at full strength. So I'm looking forward to a physical series. And I think if the Capitals can keep the Panthers offense in check, I know that's a big if, I think that their experience in some tight games might serve them well.
Final question for you, and I like going full circle here. I started this podcast about 90 minutes ago with Jeremy Rutherford and Mike Russo, Blues and Wild, and the feeling from them was, we might see 4 different starting goalies in that series: Cam Talbot, Marc-Andre Fleury, Husso, and Binnington. Let me ask you about the series you're about to cover, Washington and Florida. Do you think, Tarek, that we might see 4 different starting goalies at some point during this best of 7 series?
Ian, it's possible we'll see 5. I do think that's possible. I mean, look, Sergei Bobrovsky has 2 Vezina trophies. We know what he's capable of doing when he's dialed in. He hasn't had the postseason success that I think a player of his caliber should. And, Spencer Knight will be there if he slips up. And you look at the Capitals, Vitek Vanacek, and Ilya Samsonov, they basically rotated here over the last month. Peter Laviolette hasn't committed, or at least publicly has not committed to who's going to start game one. But they also called up Zach Lucali, who's their number 3 goalie in the organization. Look, I think that's mostly to have a practice body and to have a backup plan in South Florida in case things go sideways or someone gets injured. But he did pitch a shutout in his NHL debut earlier this season. And Vanacek and Samsonov have done anything but seize the reins. So, I was kind of joking about 5, but I do think there's a very, very strong possibility that you're going to see 4. At least from the Capitals' perspective, look, they have used 2 goaltenders all year. That's going to be the case in the series. I'd be very surprised if they stuck with 1. They're going to ride whoever's doing well. Lose a game, they're going to the other guy.
Well, hey, listen, appreciate the time. And maybe, speaking of going full circle, maybe the Capitals could atone. Remember 2010 when they were the President's Trophy winner, and Yaroslav Halak them. Maybe they get a little bit of, maybe the hockey world goes full circle here and they stun the Panthers here.
You know what? They've got so much experience. They still have, John Carlson, Alex Ovechkin, and Nicholas Backstrom, and Evgeny Kuznetsov. I mean, that's not a lineup to just dismiss. I mean, they can still win. They just need one of their 2 young goaltenders to be competent, maybe a little better than competent. If that happens, you know what? As I was talking to that one pro scout, he said, the Florida Panthers don't scare me, and I don't think they scare a lot of people. They are a high octane team that scores a lot of goals but doesn't play great defense. That does not go over very well in the postseason, as the 2010 Capitals can attest to.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, appreciate the visit, and we're looking forward to your coverage. Should be a fun series. Caps and Panthers starting on Tuesday. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks, Ian.
All right, there he goes. Does a terrific job covering the Capitals. He'll be all over that series. Caps and the President's Trophy winning Florida Panthers. Tarek El-Bashir joining us here. And that pretty much puts a bow on this live edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. A reminder, the Tuesday guys, Gentili and Custance will be by on Tuesday. That's why we call it the Tuesday edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. They'll be by on Tuesday. And boy, this is going to be a really fun week for us in the podcast because we can finally sink our teeth into some playoff action. We want to thank everybody who dropped in. Maybe you dropped in for 5 minutes or the full 90 minutes, but thanks for joining this live stream edition of the Athletic Hockey Show. Now, if you only jumped in for the last 5 minutes or 10 minutes, don't worry, don't fret. We're going to have this entire thing uploaded as a podcast a little bit later today. So make sure, speaking of podcasts, you follow us in your favorite podcast platform. Leave us a rating, leave us a review. We certainly would appreciate that. And we also want to draw your attention to a great little promotion we have going on right now with The Athletic. You can subscribe to The Athletic for just $1 a month for 6 months when you visit theathletic.com/hockey show.